Let's talk about some of these long shot contenders. Mike Pence is at 7%, according to a recent morning consult poll. Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and Vivek Ramaswamy are at 3%, and Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie are at 1%. So, right now, if you're one of these candidates who's in this crowded field at the bottom of it, what should you be doing to pull yourself apart to distinguish yourself?
Great question. Looking for your lane, number one. How is my lane different than everybody else? And I think a lot of these contenders you just named, Brittany, are having trouble figuring that out. What is my unique selling proposition, as they say in advertising 101? I don't think a lot of them have figured that out yet, other than they have records of service, many of them have done well, many of them, and think that, geez, if I just get that one shot to show myself, to be able to explain how I want to take the country, and where I want to take the country, and what it means, bottom line, that I can break out of the pack overnight. That's what they're thinking. But they have a real challenge, because I haven't heard yet a compelling alternate message out of the Republican field versus Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, other than Chris Christie, and maybe there'll be others who are going completely against that grain, especially against the former president. With all due respect to the former governor, who's crossed many bridges and had problems with certain bridges, I think that may be a bridge too far for him and for the others in a field that still is large, in a base that's largely solidified around around the former president, and to a lesser extent at this point, Ron DeSantis.
It seems like everyone at this time almost needs a tagline to distinguish themselves. Obviously, we have former President Trump. I've heard Ron DeSantis being called Trump without the baggage.
Mhm.
Chris Christie's positioning himself as the bully who can take on Trump as a bully. But New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu said just this week that he is not going to be running, and he said this: "Given where the polls are right now, every candidate needs to understand their responsibility of getting out, and getting out quickly if it's not working." And he wants to help find that non-Trump candidate. Do you think that these candidates will get out? And you mentioned that it is like an audition. Do they need to get out just yet, or wait till it's, their time if they shine?
I'm smiling because I love it when someone in elective life gives advice to other electeds about what to do and not to do when they're not in that particular contest. So, but in the case of Governor Sununu in New Hampshire, he's now, because he has, as you said, Brittany, taken himself out of contention as a potential candidate for president. He's a real kingmaker potentially in this field. I mean, if he were to line up, and knowing the governor, if he's going to support anybody in the Republican field, I assume it's going to be late. It's going to be late in the process, like probably after Iowa, um, as he starts to see how things are starting to move. If that governor, Sununu, were to endorse going into the teeth of the New Hampshire primary, he could have a dramatic impact on who stays and who leaves, right? But in terms of getting out, I mean, we've barely gotten people into the field. So and I think, again, as I said up top, I think people want to see the competition. They want to see what flavors there are out there, if that's not to minimize this at all, and how they feel about it. And that's where I think there still could be a one or many surprises before we're all said and done, from candidates who may be at the sub 1% mark and suddenly have got game.
I think things back in 2016 really turned around for former president. Well, he wasn't former president at the time. He was just Donald Trump at the time, when mainstream Republicans, started rallying around him. Chris Christie, surprisingly, was one of the first ones back in February of 2016 when he dropped out of the race. Do you think one of these maybe long shot contenders could see that same sort of success if, they rally around, if Republicans rally around them?
Possibly, but we're a democracy, and we become more so through time. I think this is something that the voters are going to decide, and not electeds. It used to be we would line up the endorsements, Brittany, early, right? Get as many people of a worthy ilk behind our candidate as early as possible, and we started down the same lanes. Who's in elective office? the major donors, those kinds of endorsements. Now I think the endorsements have really faded away practically in terms of impact, especially when you have a race like this, which is a national conversation. It's not a local campaign where if you're in Tampa, Florida, you're not hearing about it in Topeka, Kansas. Everyone's going to be in on the conversation. They can be in it 24/7. And I think the voters are the ones that are going to make the ultimate and most important endorsements. And you'll see how they're endorsing, not in terms of signing a pledge sheet, but in terms of how the polls start to move as we get into the reality of this contest.